Clay Travis, 104.5 The Fan in Nashville, and 105.5 The Zone in Nashville, also NBC Sports Radio. Clay, if you had to do what Johnny Manziel had to do, complete 20 passes with a 5-step drop, how many could you complete?
I would be more concerned about tripping myself on the 5-step drop than I would be the throws. I think my speed would be questionable. I don't know that I would get very good depth in the pocket. The actual throws, I think I could make most of them. We had a big bet at one point when I was in law school about how far we could throw footballs. We were out at the bar debating, and this is actually a great challenge in general. And I thought I could throw one 50 yards, and I got it 48. So I have a pretty good sense, at least, when I was 26, of what my arm strength is. I know my limitations. So anything under 48 yards, I think I could throw. Wouldn't necessarily be a laser by any stretch of the imagination, but I could get it there. And so the drop would be an issue, though. I don't think I would do very good footwork-wise.
Now, you're down in College Station at Manziel's Pro Day, correct?
Yeah, I'm sitting directly across the street from the facility right now at noon Eastern. He will appear. The president is going to be there, former President George Bush Sr., the current governor of Texas, obviously, who also ran for president, Rick Perry, and I'm sure there will be just scads of famous people otherwise. It's kind of the perfect way to end Johnny Manziel's football career.
Is there any buzz that Matthew McConaughey will show up? Big Texas guy.
What, that would be the if Russ Cole rolled in the with the handlebar mustache and True Detective style. He's a Texas guy, but I think that would be the ultimate bandwagon jump if he went from Longhorn to Aggie just to ride Johnny Manziel's coattails.
How impactful is this pro day going to be for Johnny Manziel's pro prospects?
Yeah, you always hear that question, and I don't think there's an easy answer. I think that Johnny Manziel will be gone in the top 5 picks. So I based on everybody that you talk to here, I don't claim to be a draft expert. It appears that Blake Bortles is probably going to be the Houston Texans pick. And so then if you're Johnny Manziel, what you're effectively auditioning for is either somebody to trade up, which I don't necessarily think will happen, or you want to be the Jacksonville Jaguars guy, or you want to, worst case scenario, be the Cleveland Browns guy. Everybody said Bridgewater didn't have a good pro day. Everybody said that Bortles did. Manziel's competitive. So I think knowing that he's going last, I think he wants to leave a lasting image in people's minds and really kind of scare the Houston Texans, for lack of a better term. He's already said it. If you don't draft me, I'm going to make you pay for it. If he went to the Jaguars and was in the same division, that would be pretty tough. So I think I think that he will perform very well because he always has when the lights have mattered. Come on, and the game has been the biggest and the stage has been the brightest. But I think there's a lot at stake. I really do.
Peter King was on earlier, Clay, and he talked about how NFL executives are looking to see Manziel as a pocket passer, making that 5-step, 7-step drop and throwing to wide receivers. How do you think that translates for him at the pro level? Is he capable of being that type of player?
That's going to be, again, a really tough question. I think that's why Bill O'Brien is probably leaning towards Blake Bortles, because he wants somebody who's going to run the offense as opposed to everybody in the NFL wants that, right? It's one thing to be able to create when the plan deviates and collapses. But I think a lot of people are nervous in the NFL that Manziel won't execute the plan, that he's going to freelance too much. And there are very few quarterbacks, and in fact none, it would seem to me, that consistently can win if they're freelancing. And so Manziel did a lot of freelancing in Kevin Sumlin's system. It gave him a great deal of freedom. And some of his most electric plays came, almost as if he were playing in the backyard just for fun. And that's what made him such an electric player and so beloved. But it's also what gets NFL head coaches fired. So I think that's the dalliance that everybody is concerned with there. What exactly can Johnny do when it comes to running an offense and being where he needs to be and putting throws where they need to be when things don't break down around him? Can he just execute a simple offense?
He's Clay Travis, 104.5 The Zone in Nashville, also NBC Sports Radio. Clay, you're a lawyer in addition to being a college football and basketball analyst. Yesterday with the ruling about the Northwestern football players were allowed to form a union, what did that mean to you?
It's a big story. I mean, it really is, because at its most fundamental level, what this did was, I believe, upset the existence of the term student athlete. Because if you read this NLRB report, which I did yesterday afternoon, effectively what it says is that these players are employees of Northwestern. And if you read it, effectively what it says is they're basically the same thing as people who work in Northwestern's hospital. They don't even have to be students. The connection between students and athleticism that has been such a paramount part of the amateur system that the NCAA embraces is entirely broken here. Because if they're employees, then it doesn't matter whether they're students at all. They could just as easily go out and hire their own football team based on the logical reasoning of this opinion. And so the NCAA is under siege. I don't think there's any doubt that its business model is going to die. I think the question is, can they evolve quickly enough to come up with a model that allows them to continue to exist? Because right now they're just taking body blows, and this was the equivalent of a Tyson uppercut back in the early 90s before he got knocked out by Buster Douglas.
It's a nice boxing reference, Clay. I appreciate that.
Yes, I try.
What's the next step in all this? I mean, the Northwestern players, according to this regional director of the National Labor Relations Board, they're allowed to form a union. Now what? Where do they go from here?
Well, first of all, the Northwestern will appeal the fact that this is whether or not they should be able to form a union, whether they are in fact employees, and so that will go up to the next chain of command. I think eventually it'll end up in a circuit court. Before that, a district court. I mean, this is something people will ask about. You know, it's a process. The Ed O'Bannon case now has been pending for 5 years. That's the likeness case.
Yeah.
I think that it's unlikely that anybody who's presently on Northwestern's team, there will be a final resolution while those guys' careers are still ongoing. I think this is a 4 or 5 year process. And to me, the biggest story, guys, is, first of all, we don't know a lot of the legality. Any lawyer who comes on and says, oh, this is how it's going to work, this is what's going to happen with Title IX, these are the implications that are going to unspool from it. Keep in mind, only 2 unions, if every team is considered a union, and that's the other question, what's the size of this union? Only 2 college sports teams have value over and above their scholarship. Men's basketball, obviously, with the NCAA tournament going on right now, and it's football. Everybody else who gets a scholarship is being compensated more than they would if they were on the open market. So if you're a women's full scholarship swimmer, there's no way on earth that your value to the university equates to a full scholarship of $60,000 or whatever it costs. So my question is, to what extent can you reconcile these unions being able to collectively bargain with Title IX, which requires that all athletic scholarships be treated equal? This whole thing is just a mountain of legal issues that aren't resolved and are honestly coming before the courts for the first time. And I don't think anybody can reasonably predict exactly what's going to happen, just that by and large, this is all very bad for the NCAA.
Okay, say you're the new executive director of this union. What's the first thing you ask for?
Well, I'm writing on this today because this actually gets into being an interesting loophole. If I was Pat Fitzgerald, I would say let's negotiate with the union and give them a lot more benefits than we are allowed to under the NCAA rules, because suddenly we could go out and recruit great players that otherwise we wouldn't be able to get at Northwestern. Instead of using this as a hindrance, I would say, okay, well, we're going to give them $10,000 additional on top of the scholarships. You know, the Big Ten schools make a lot of money. Football is very valuable. Think about the recruits that Northwestern could get, and they're bound. Once you collectively bargain, you're bound under the NLRB. If they didn't fight this, if they just said, okay, we'll consider you guys to be employees, Northwestern could suddenly become a football factory. So the first thing that I think they will ask for is, I think they'll ask for full cost of attendance. I think they'll ask for, sundry costs also associated with travel, things that college kids have expenses for. Here's the other thing, Chris, I think is a big deal. People say it's just Northwestern. It's not just Northwestern, because in that example I just gave you, if Northwestern's players start getting something over and above what everybody else gets for scholarship football players, everybody else has to match. So even though there aren't a ton of unions, this union can be such a driving force that it can change everything, because everything is so competitive, you have to match what everybody else does. So if they're really smart and aggressive about it, I think that the potential could be pretty earth-shattering in terms of how it changes the collegiate model.
Good to talk to you, Clay. If you happen to come across McConaughey down there, could you stick a phone in his hand?
Oh, no doubt. I'll give him a Lone Star, too, because, we definitely remember True Detective. He loved the Lone Star cans. And I'm actually kind of disappointed that George W. Bush isn't showing up, too. His dad can show up, but he can't.
Is he not a Manziel fan?
Maybe so. That would be quite the scandal. Dad loves him. I mean, last night he was hanging out with Senior Bush was hanging out with Manziel. I'd love to see those pictures. And W, maybe W is a Longhorn. Maybe he's out with McConaughey today.
What do you think a night out with Senior Bush looks like?
Back in the day, I bet it was pretty fun. I mean, this dude was a fighter pilot. He got shot down. I mean, he was a pretty big badass. But Nowadays, I think it's probably a little bit of wine and probably some extraordinary stories about what politics was like back in the 80s, 90s, and 70s.
One night only, Manziel or McConaughey, who would you roll with?
I would probably roll with Manziel because I think I would be able to talk about that more than I would McConaughey. Like, well, what I do, Manziel, a wild night with Manziel would be a lot more of a pan out for me than McConaughey. And McConaughey's older; he might have gotten the partying out. Manziel, he's still going to be good for it.
In his prime, though, I think McConaughey had some fun.
Oh well, look, there's no Matthew McConaughey can walk into any bar in just about any state and 99% of the women, he can just snap his fingers and they would get up and leave with him. There's not very many men who can do that. McConaughey's one.
Good to talk to you, Clay. Thank you.
Appreciate y'all having me.
It's Clay Travis, 104.5 The Zone in Nashville, also has his own weekend show on NBC Sports Radio.